There's a lot of people in this country with traumatic brain injuries.
Even though it's a silent epidemic, it's a very real silent epidemic.
Hey, it's Dr. Phil. Welcome to Fill in the Blanks. I'm going to spend today alerting you to a serious problem in our country and an equally serious solution, actually. I like to talk about problems and solutions. If you look at why young people, really all people, get in trouble on credit cards and things of that nature, it's not because they're just reckless spenders. It's because some unexpected medical crisis arises. When 500,000 Americans file for bankruptcy every year due to medical bills, it's because we just don't understand the scope of how steep that pile of bills can get. Every minute of every day, somebody in America is in an auto accident, and many of those involve spine and brain injuries. Now, when that happens, you move into a whole different category of expense. You break an arm or a leg, I'm not saying that's nothing, but the expenses are usually pretty finite and manageable. But when you get into a brain or spinal cord injury, you can be looking at a life plan. It can go on for 30 years, 40 years, and be millions and millions of dollars. And the problem is the most affordable insurance policies, including Medicare and Medicaid, don't cover the overwhelming expenses that accompany traumatic brain and spinal injuries. It leaves a lot of people just ruined, not only quality of life-wise, but financially. So my guest today is a kindred spirit. He is the president of the Neurotrauma Association, and he has an answer that I want all of you to get behind so we can deal with this national issue successfully. Now, those of you that follow me know that when I was in practice, I put a lot of emphasis on brain and central nervous system functioning and trauma. So this has been a passion of mine. And so I want to welcome to the show John Prosser II.
Hello.
John, how are you?
It's great to be alive, Dr. Phil. How are you?
Good. I was so glad to hear that this is work that you're doing. This is a big deal for people. I was talking about how much this can wreck people financially as well as their quality of life.
Yes.
Because people just can't possibly estimate the financial burdens this could bring on. And I know there are so many people out there that are suffering and enduring this. So I just wanted to talk about it. So tell me how you got involved in all of this.
Well, for the past 30 years, Doctor, I have been an owner of a company called Health Partners Home Care, where we specialize in taking care of people that have suffered traumatic brain injuries, traumatic spinal cord injuries from automobile accidents. And the reason I did that was because the insurance companies asked me to create that kind of a model because it didn't exist. And so we were the first company in America, the first company in Michigan to manifest a model that takes care of you in your house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Along the way of that process, I became inspired when I read a couple of articles. One was in the Wall Street Journal that said, the states that innovate will be the winners in reducing their Medicaid overhead. And that's where most of the people in America go. After you suffer your bankruptcy from your medical bills, you go into a Medicaid facility, and I skipped over an important thing. The family loses their home. And now you're in a facility and you're not getting 24-hour care. And the fact is you're going to deteriorate rather rapidly. Most people that need constant attention and don't get it, they die from sepsis. They develop decubitus ulcers. So I had this inspiration that if the number one reason for bankruptcy is medical bills, and we're all being crushed by Medicaid, what if every other state adopted the Michigan model for lifetime care?
I want to really talk about this in terms of the impact on people and families, and I don't want them to think that we're just doing an insurance commercial here, because we're not. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about impact on people's lives. Why do you think this hasn't become a national program? Because, look, we know that these injuries, sadly, continue to happen. We know they are a reality. We do everything we can. There are advances in technology. There are things that can continue to be done to minimize and hopefully continue to get a downward trend for these happening. But right now, they are a reality in the United States. I can tell you when I was in practice, and a big part of my practice was working with the neurosurgeons and neurologists that were involved in the aftercare, and I watched exactly what you're talking about. When something like this happens, people that are self-sustaining, they're taking care of families, taking care of themselves, in the blink of an eye, everything changes. They're rendered unable to perform activities of daily living. They're unable to care for themselves, let alone others. And it requires such a multi-level support system. But yet we have so many states that just don't react to this. They just don't deal with it like they do in Michigan. Why do you think that is?
Um, I believe, doctor, it's because they don't know about it. And it may sound like a glib answer, but I've done a great deal of work with New York, Florida, Texas, and California that have the highest Medicaid costs. And every time I talk to the health department or the person in charge of Medicaid or the finance, they're like, how is it you're telling me about the elephant in the room that I never saw? So they simply don't know that this model exists in Michigan. And I made a lot of progress in Florida, and then they had things like COVID come along, and now you've got a new administration. So that's the mission of the Neurotrauma Association, is to raise the consciousness for everyone, especially the 250 million drivers that don't realize the greatest risk they have every day is to get into their car. It's the number one reason for bankruptcy, medical bills. And when you suffer a brain or a spinal cord injury, it's oftentimes you're going to spend over $1 million in the acute hospital. That doesn't even count your subacute rehab and your acute rehab, and certainly doesn't care for the lifetime care in your home. So I really,
It's so sad to see productive citizens that are working hard, doing a good job. They're out there, then this happens, and then they just kind of get lost in the shuffle. People don't understand. When I talk about a life plan, and I was involved in this so much in practice, when you have to go in and calculate a life plan, you say, okay, you're going to need a nurse, and there's going to have to be some level of nursing care for you 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for the next projected 40 years. That's your life expectancy. Add that up. Then you got to start putting in occupational therapist and all these different things. That meter starts running at a whine you can hear a long way away.
you can expect, if you're in a catastrophically injured accident, to spend $500,000, $40,000 a month on your care for the in-home nursing care. That doesn't count the therapies. That doesn't count your power wheelchair or your adaptive van or your adaptive home. And over a lifetime, you could easily eclipse $20 million.
I work an awful lot with Dr. Daniel Amen with the Amen Clinics, and he has a huge database of SPECT scans. If you can get to an Amen clinic, you can find out an awful lot about your brain and if you have a TBI, and if so, where and how it's performing. So, well, you talk about imaging, and you do something called SPECT, single photon emission computed tomography. Talk about what that is and what you look at, because you look at three things in particular. So describe what's a patient experience when they go through this imaging, and it's a nuclear medicine study, but talk about what a patient goes through when they do this.
So SPECT looks at blood flow and activity. It's a really simple procedure. The hardest part of the procedure is getting a tiny needle into a vein in their arm. We usually do it twice, once at rest, and once when they do a concentration task. And so once we just have them sitting in a room resting. And then the second time, we'll have them do a Connor's continuous performance test. So we're getting their brain when they're trying to use it. And then after they're in the injection room, they'll lay on a camera table, and it takes about 20 minutes. We'll take a picture of where the medicine has gone in their brain. And it gives us an image of living brain tissue. So we also do quantitative EEG, where we look at the electrical activity in the brain. But I like SPECT because it gives us this beautiful 3D image of every area of their brain. And is it healthy? Is it underactive or is it overactive? And you'd mentioned PTSD and TBI. I published a study on 21,000 people showing we could separate those two disorders with very high levels of accuracy. Now, why is that important? Because the treatments are actually opposite of each other. With TBI, or traumatic brain injury, we see hurt areas that are low in activity. And with PTSD, we see their emotional brain works too hard. So one, you want to calm the brain. The other, you want to stimulate the brain. And how do you really know unless you look ahead of time?
Yeah. And so they're throwing medication at these people without knowing whether their brain needs to be calmed in an area or stimulated in an area. And so if it needs to be calmed and they give them a brain stimulant, it's like throwing gas on a fire, and they send them back out there and they're frenetic. They can't understand why they have a bad outcome. And how long does this take for a patient when they come in? How long does it take to get the workup?
Well, when we work up a patient, we do a lot. We take really long histories to understand the story of your life. The scans themselves, start to finish, is about an hour. So it's pretty simple. And then we do neuropsych assessments as well. So we never make a diagnosis just on a scan, but we don't want to make a diagnosis without it, because it's like we're going to miss a whole important piece of information.
I just had a total knee replacement.
Oh, my.
On the left. And when you go through something like that, they put you on anticoagulants and antiplatelets, medications, things like that. And you bump your head pretty good during regimen of those medications. It's awful easy to get a brain bleed if something
That's
happens.
right.
So there's just a lot of things that affect all of this that we have to pay attention to.
Amen. We're trying to raise the consciousness. I mean, I think is important in this whole conversation is raising the awareness of people. There are things you can do. I mean, drive more cautiously. A lot of people don't understand physics. When somebody's tailgating on you at 70 miles an hour, it'd be good to shift into the other lane and slow down. You want to keep a car length in front of you for every 10 miles an hour you're moving. So if you're moving 50 miles an hour, you want to be 5 car lengths behind. Everybody seems to be really anxious, but you're literally taking your life and other lives at risk because you don't slow down. And then there's things like insisting that your children wear helmets if you're going to skate or ride a bike. The JCs did a wonderful effort back in the 90s to raise the consciousness. We worked with McDonald's and Domino's to get parents to realize these probabilities exist for brain injury, and you're doing a great service to your children if you insist that they wear a helmet for any kind of a movement activity, roller skates, skateboards, bikes, all of it.
John, let me ask you this. What can people do and what should they ask for in their states to get the kind of model that Michigan has? There are reasons they should do it. It provides comprehensive care for injury victims, and it protects them from bankruptcy. Clearly, those are huge.
Well, I think they can go to the website, Doc, and they can learn themselves. We have all kinds of videos. We have videos that are 2 hours long that are very technical. We have a short 10 or 15-minute animation video. But the thing they can do is identify who is the senator that's in your state that's on the insurance committee. Who's the representatives? So contact them and send them the link to the neurotraumaassociation.com and tell them you signed the petition and you believe it'd be in the best interest of all the citizens of this state if the legislature looks into this proven and successful model that's been used in Michigan only for 50 years. And then they can certainly refer those people to contact me. My contact information is at the website. And I've done this. I've incrementally had calls, and they can also contact their local media. If you know that there's a certain person that talks on health on television for your local CBS, ABC, NBC affiliate, then you could ask them to interview me. You could do that with your favorite radio station. I've probably been on Mitch Albom's radio show 200 or 300 times in the last 10 years. talking about this very topic. And then what we can do is we take those interviews and we share them with other media. I actually talked to about 75 producers in the fall of 20. And they all said, wow, this is a fabulous idea. But right now we're stuck on the COVID stories. Check back with us in a year. And even in 21, we were still on COVID. So the little things like that can make a big difference.
Well, let me say to my viewers here in wrapping up this conversation, I'm talking to John Prosser II, and he's president of Neurotrauma Association. The website he's referring to, and I've been there most recently today, it's neurotraumaassociation.com. When you go to the site, it's a very rich site. One of the things that I've always noticed, and I'm glad they do when they do, but you always notice when somebody is impacted by a disease, maybe it's MS or dementia or cancer or Crohn's disease, whatever it might be, whenever they're impacted by it, by someone in their family, someone they know, then all of a sudden it kind of brings it home. And so they start really working to raise funds and raise awareness on it. What I'm asking here is don't wait until you suffer a traumatic brain injury. Don't wait until you're one of the 1.7 million people in America that is impacted by this through a fall or a car accident or some head trauma and become part of the 500,000 people a year that go bankrupt because you don't have the wherewithal to sustain the life impact that these bills stack up and have on you. Don't wait until you're impacted by it. Do something now. There are millions of people in America right now that are drowning under the financial burden of this, that don't have the ability to get quality care. And as John says, he'll go and make great headway with a politician, a congressman, a senator, their staffers, and then everything changes before they can actually get it onto the floor, get it voted on, get it implemented. It's like he's fighting a war of attrition. He goes, makes his case, people understand it, but then before they can get anything enacted, they're gone. He's got to start all over again. He's got to feel like he's in the movie Groundhog Day.
Yeah, no, I do, because but it's like my mission. It's you said if you know somebody, don't wait. I've known thousands of people for 30 years. I've gone to the hospitals and met with the people and met with the families, and it's a terrible tragedy. And it doesn't get better. It can get to a quality of life that you can't believe, because if you have the proper resources, you can have that. But if your viewers just went to the website and signed the petition, that allows us, we hopefully get millions of Americans. There's 250 million Americans that have registered cars. So if we get half of them to say, wow, I want this in my state, that's a big statement. And that all comes from people just going to a website and clicking the petition.
It is a big statement. And if you don't think you can be in the backyard, having a barbecue 1 minute, running to the store to pick something up the next, and your entire world change in the blink of an eye, it can. So be proactive. Do something about this at this point. The place to start is go to neurotraumaassociation.com, sign the petition, and take a minute. Also, audit your family, young and old alike, and see, is somebody suffering with TBI and it is undiagnosed? It won't get better on its own necessarily. If you do some of the things that can be done to help, it can make a huge, huge difference. Now, sometimes you shake this off and the brain is very resilient and it'll snap back from it. But sometimes you need intervention, and quicker the better. So kind of look around and ask yourself if maybe grandma's having more trouble than she was because she took a fall and didn't tell you. Be aware. think about this stuff. It's not always catastrophic at one time. It can happen across time. So think about it. And John, I love your passion about this. I really do. We're going to cover up our website with links and information about this so people can find it, get to it. The Michigan model that you guys have with $26 billion in the fund at this point, God bless everybody for getting busy on that.
Well, amen, Doctor. And I'd just like to give a shout out to my son, John, who co-authored our book. He's really the primary force behind that. I'm a good storyteller and I knew what I wanted to say, but John really crafted that publication. And people, for what it's worth, insurance is risk management. So how well are you covered for the risk? That's really the question you have to put to yourself. And, go to the website, check it out, reach out if you got questions. I'm so grateful to you, Dr. Phil. Thank you for this opportunity.
Well, you just said a good thing to close on. It's terrible if you think you've got coverage, you think you're protected, and then something happens and you go, oh my God, I thought I was protected. Now I find out that I didn't have near the coverage that I thought I did. And all of this information is on the website. So go there and find out. And John, thank you for your work. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your information. And I hope everybody listens to what we're talking about.
I do as well. Thank you so much, Doctor. You're a great guy.
John, thanks so much. Tell Mitch hello for me.
You got it.
All right. Thanks, man.